The marble floors of the Palazzo Vecchio echoed with footsteps as morning light filtered through ancient windows, casting long shadows across rooms where power had been wielded for centuries. In these halls where Niccolò Machiavelli once walked, contemplating the nature of political survival and human ambition, the timeless principles of strategic communication continue to resonate. The art of ending arguments swiftly and decisively, while simultaneously forging an unbreakable inner fortress, represents perhaps the most crucial skill in navigating the complex dynamics of human interaction. The concept emerges not from mere cleverness or wit, but from a deeper understanding of human psychology and the mechanics of power. When faced with verbal confrontation, most individuals operate from positions of emotional reactivity, allowing their responses to be dictated by impulse rather than strategy. They engage in lengthy debates that drain energy, damage relationships, and rarely produce meaningful resolution. The strategic mind, however, approaches conflict as an opportunity to demonstrate mastery while efficiently resolving tension. Consider the executive who finds herself constantly defending decisions in board meetings, watching precious time dissolve into circular arguments that accomplish nothing beyond creating frustration. Or the entrepreneur whose innovative ideas become buried beneath the weight of skeptical voices, each criticism chipping away at confidence and momentum. These scenarios represent more than simple disagreements, they reveal fundamental questions about personal authority, strategic thinking, and the ability to maintain composure under pressure. The 7 strategic comebacks that emerge from Machiavellian principles operate on multiple levels simultaneously. They address the immediate tactical need to end unproductive discourse while establishing psychological dominance and preserving energy for more important endeavors. Yet their true power lies not in the words themselves, but in the mindset they represent, the transformation from reactive victim to strategic actor. The foundation of strategic response. The first principle underlying effective strategic response involves recognizing that most arguments stem from emotional needs rather than logical disagreements. People argue not necessarily because they seek truth or resolution, but because they desire validation, attention, or the satisfaction of being right. Understanding this fundamental motivation allows the strategic communicator to address the underlying psychological dynamic rather than the surface-level content of the disagreement. When someone launches into criticism or confrontation, they typically expect certain responses: defensiveness, counterattack, justification, or submission. The strategic comeback disrupts these expectations by operating from an entirely different framework. Instead of engaging with the emotional content, it addresses the structural reality of the situation while maintaining dignity and authority. The power of strategic response becomes evident in its ability to reframe entire interactions. Rather than allowing others to dictate the terms of engagement, the strategic individual maintains control over both the direction and duration of conflict. This represents a fundamental shift from reactive to proactive positioning, transforming potential victims into architects of their own experience. Strategic comeback 1. The redirect through acknowledgement. The first strategic comeback operates through the principle of acknowledging without agreeing. When faced with criticism or challenge, the response follows this structure: you raise an interesting perspective. My experience has shown me. This approach accomplishes several objectives simultaneously while appearing completely reasonable and diplomatic. The acknowledgement serves to diffuse immediate emotional tension by validating the other person's right to express their viewpoint. However, it carefully avoids agreeing with the content of their criticism. The phrase "interesting perspective" neither confirms nor denies the validity of their position while subtly suggesting that it represents merely one viewpoint among many possible interpretations. The transition to personal experience provides unassailable ground for the response. No one can effectively argue against another person's direct experience, making this position virtually immune to further challenge. The phrase "my experience has shown me" establishes authority based on actual engagement with reality rather than theoretical knowledge or opinion. In practice, this strategic comeback transforms confrontational dynamics into educational opportunities. When a colleague challenges a business decision by saying, "This strategy will never work in our market," the strategic response becomes, "You raise an interesting perspective. My experience working with similar markets has shown me that unexpected approaches often yield breakthrough results when conventional wisdom suggests otherwise." This response accomplishes multiple objectives. It acknowledges the colleague's concern without accepting their conclusion, establishes the respondent's credibility through reference to relevant experience, and subtly suggests that conventional thinking may be limiting. The challenger finds themselves in the position of either accepting this reasonable response or appearing unreasonably argumentative by continuing to press their point. The psychological impact extends beyond the immediate interaction. By consistently responding from a position of experience-based authority while remaining diplomatically open to other viewpoints, the strategic individual builds a reputation for reasonableness combined with strength. Others begin to recognize that confronting this person will not result in the satisfying emotional engagement that feeds argumentative behavior. Strategic comeback 2, the reframe through higher purpose. The second strategic comeback elevates the conversation beyond personal disagreement by connecting it to larger organizational or societal purposes. The structure follows: while we could debate this extensively, what matters most is. This approach transforms potential conflict into collaborative focus on shared objectives. The opening phrase acknowledges that extended debate remains possible while simultaneously suggesting that such debate would be less productive than focusing on more important considerations. This creates subtle pressure to abandon argumentative positioning in favor of constructive engagement. The person who continues to argue after this reframe appears petty and self-serving compared to the respondent's focus on higher purposes. The reframe component introduces elements that transcend personal ego or individual preferences. By connecting the discussion to customer needs, organizational success, team effectiveness, or other universally valued outcomes, the strategic communicator occupies moral and practical high ground that becomes difficult to challenge without appearing selfish or short-sighted. Consider the scenario where a team member criticizes a project approach during a meeting, saying, "This timeline is completely unrealistic and sets everyone up for failure." The strategic response becomes, while we could debate timeline specifics extensively, what matters most is delivering exceptional value to our clients while maintaining the team's long-term sustainability. Let's focus on identifying the specific support and resources needed to achieve both objectives. This response accomplishes remarkable transformation of the dynamic. Instead of defending the timeline or engaging in detailed justification, it reframes the entire conversation around shared values, client success, and team well-being. The original critic now faces a choice between appearing to oppose these obviously positive objectives or shifting into collaborative problem-solving mode. The strategic power of this approach lies in its ability to transform opposition into partnership. Rather than creating winners and losers, it establishes a framework where everyone can contribute to achieving mutually valued outcomes. The person who initially approached with criticism often finds themselves naturally shifting into supportive roles as the conversation moves toward practical solutions. Strategic comeback 3, the philosophical displacement. The third strategic comeback operates by elevating the discussion to philosophical principles that transcend immediate circumstances. The structure utilizes, "the real question here isn't, but rather." This approach shifts focus from specific criticisms to fundamental principles that govern decision-making and behavior. This technique proves particularly effective because it demonstrates intellectual sophistication while avoiding direct engagement with potentially inflammatory specific accusations or challenges. Instead of defending particular actions or decisions, the strategic communicator addresses the underlying philosophical framework that guides their approach. The phrase, "the real question here isn't," serves to redefine the parameters of discussion while subtly suggesting that the original challenge missed the essential point. This redefinition occurs without directly stating that the challenger was wrong or misguided, maintaining diplomatic courtesy while asserting intellectual leadership. The completion but rather introduces the philosophical principle that the strategic communicator considers most relevant. This principle typically reflects values or approaches that enjoy broad acceptance, making it difficult for others to oppose without appearing to reject widely held beliefs about excellence, integrity, or effectiveness. When someone challenges a leadership decision by saying, "You're micromanaging this team and destroying morale," the strategic response becomes, "The real question here isn't about management style, but rather about how we create environments where exceptional people can produce their best work while maintaining clear accountability for results." This response transforms a personal attack into a discussion about leadership philosophy. The challenger cannot continue their original line of criticism without appearing to oppose the obviously reasonable goals of supporting exceptional performance and maintaining accountability. The conversation naturally shifts toward constructive exploration of how to achieve these shared objectives. The long-term impact of this approach involves establishing reputation as someone who thinks at higher levels than typical workplace discourse. Others begin to recognize that engaging this person requires elevating their own thinking beyond simple criticism or complaint toward more sophisticated analysis of underlying principles and objectives. Strategic comeback 4. The time value calculation. The fourth strategic comeback introduces economic thinking about the allocation of time and energy resources. The structure employs, I could spend the next hour explaining why that's not accurate, but I'd rather invest our time in. This approach simultaneously suggests confidence in one's position while demonstrating practical priorities that transcend ego-driven debate. The opening phrase, I could spend the next hour explaining, implies comprehensive ability to address the challenge while suggesting that such detailed response would require significant time investment. This creates subtle pressure on the challenger to consider whether their criticism deserves such extensive attention, often leading them to recognize that their challenge may have been overstated or poorly considered. The contrast, but I'd rather invest our time in, introduces the strategic communicator's preferred allocation of attention and energy. This preference typically involves productive activities that create value rather than defensive activities that merely protect against criticism. The word invest particularly reinforces the economic framework by suggesting that time represents valuable resource requiring thoughtful allocation. The completion of this comeback identifies specific productive alternatives that serve broader objectives. These alternatives should be clearly valuable and difficult to oppose, creating a choice between seemingly petty argument and obviously constructive action. In practice, when someone challenges a technical decision by saying, your approach is overly complicated and will confuse everyone, the strategic response becomes, I could spend the next hour explaining the research and testing that led to this design, but I'd rather invest our time in creating the training materials and support systems that will help everyone succeed with the new approach. This response accomplishes multiple strategic objectives. It suggests comprehensive justification exists without providing defensive details. It demonstrates practical focus on implementation success rather than theoretical debate. It positions the challenger as potentially wasting valuable time that could be spent on productive activities. The psychological impact involves creating cognitive dissonance for potential arguers. They must choose between appearing to prefer unproductive debate over constructive action, or accepting the strategic individual's redirection toward more valuable activities. Most people, when faced with this choice explicitly, naturally select the more constructive option. Strategic comeback 5. The outcome-oriented challenge. The fifth strategic comeback shifts focus from process disagreements to results measurement. The structure utilizes, let's agree on how we'll measure success and revisit this conversation when we have data. This approach transforms subjective argument into objective evaluation while establishing timeline boundaries that prevent endless debate. This comeback proves particularly powerful because it acknowledges that legitimate disagreements about approach can exist while establishing that ultimate validation comes through results rather than argument. It demonstrates confidence in one's chosen approach while providing reasonable mechanism for evaluation that satisfies the challenger's need to be heard. The phrase let's agree on how we'll measure success shifts the conversation from defensive justification to collaborative definition of evaluation criteria. This reframing typically reduces emotional tension because both parties can participate in establishing fair measurement standards rather than one person defending against another's attacks. The completion revisit this conversation when we have data establishes clear timeline boundaries that prevent the argument from continuing indefinitely while providing specific mechanism for future evaluation. This temporal boundary proves crucial because it allows the strategic communicator to proceed with their chosen approach while giving the challenger reasonable assurance that their concerns will be addressed through objective assessment. Consider the situation where a marketing manager challenges an advertising strategy by saying, this campaign will never resonate with our target demographic and will waste the entire budget. The strategic response becomes, let's agree on how we'll measure campaign effectiveness, engagement rates, conversion metrics, and cost per acquisition, and revisit this conversation when we have data from the first 2 weeks. This response transforms the challenge from subjective opinion battle into objective measurement discussion. The challenger cannot reasonably oppose data-driven evaluation, and the specific metrics provide concrete framework for assessment that removes personal bias from future evaluation. The long-term strategic value involves establishing reputation for results-oriented thinking rather than ego-driven defensiveness. Others learn that challenging this individual leads to productive evaluation frameworks rather than satisfying emotional confrontations, gradually reducing the frequency of argumentative interactions. Strategic comeback 6. The expertise differential. The sixth strategic comeback addresses situations where the challenger lacks sufficient expertise to meaningfully evaluate the subject matter. The structure employs, I understand your concern. Given the complexity of this area, I'm confident in proceeding with the current approach. This response acknowledges the challenger's perspective while gently establishing expertise boundaries that make continued argument appear inappropriate. This comeback requires careful calibration because it risks appearing condescending if not executed with appropriate diplomatic skill. The success depends on delivering the message with genuine respect for the challenger while clearly establishing that detailed explanation would require more technical background than can be reasonably provided in the current context. The opening "I understand your concern" validates the challenger's right to express worry or skepticism without agreeing that their concern necessarily reflects accurate understanding of the situation. This validation helps maintain relationship quality while preparing for the expertise assertion that follows. The phrase "given the complexity of this area" serves multiple functions. It acknowledges that the subject matter involves sophisticated elements that may not be immediately apparent to casual observers. It also suggests that comprehensive evaluation requires deeper knowledge than might be expected, preparing the ground for the expertise claim without directly stating that the challenger lacks sufficient understanding. The conclusion "I'm confident in proceeding with the current approach" establishes the strategic communicator's decision while implying that this confidence stems from superior understanding of the complex factors involved. The word confident particularly suggests careful consideration rather than arbitrary choice, while proceeding indicates that debate phase has concluded in favor of action. When a colleague challenges a technical implementation by saying, "This architecture seems unnecessarily complicated and will create maintenance nightmares," the strategic response becomes, "I understand your concern about complexity. Given the specific scalability requirements and integration constraints we're addressing, I'm confident in proceeding with this architecture based on the technical analysis we've completed." This response acknowledges the colleague's perspective while establishing the detailed technical considerations led to the current approach. The challenger faces the choice between accepting this expertise-based confidence or demanding detailed technical justification that may exceed their ability to meaningfully evaluate. Strategic comeback 7. The meta-level observation. The seventh strategic comeback operates by commenting on the argumentative dynamic itself rather than engaging with the specific content of disagreement. The structure utilizes, "I notice we're heading toward a lengthy debate about this. What would you like to accomplish from this conversation?" This approach transforms the interaction from adversarial argument into collaborative goal setting. This meta-level approach proves particularly effective because it requires the challenger to explicitly state their objectives rather than simply expressing disagreement or criticism. Many argumentative interactions occur without clear purpose beyond emotional expression, and requiring explicit goal articulation often reveals the absence of constructive intent. The opening "I notice we're heading toward a lengthy debate" acknowledges the trajectory without assigning blame to either party. This neutral observation creates space for both participants to step back from emotional engagement and consider whether continued argument serves their interests. The question "What would you like to accomplish from this conversation?" serves multiple strategic functions. It shifts focus from past disagreements to future objectives. It requires the challenger to articulate specific goals rather than simply expressing opposition. It demonstrates the strategic communicator's interest in productive outcomes rather than defensive protection of ego. Most importantly, this question often reveals that the challenger has not clearly considered what they hope to achieve through their challenge. When forced to articulate specific objectives, many people recognize that their argumentative impulse does not connect to meaningful goals, leading them to naturally withdraw from confrontational positioning. In practice, when someone challenges a decision by saying, "This approach is completely wrong and will create serious problems," the strategic response becomes, "I notice we're heading toward a lengthy debate about this approach. What would you like to accomplish from this conversation?" Are you looking for specific information about the reasoning behind the decision, or do you have alternative suggestions you'd like to discuss? This response accomplishes remarkable transformation of the dynamic. Instead of defending the decision or engaging with the criticism directly, it focuses on understanding the challenger's actual objectives and creating framework for productive engagement. The challenger must either articulate constructive goals or reveal that their challenge lacks specific purpose beyond criticism. The psychological impact involves demonstrating sophisticated communication skills while maintaining complete reasonableness. Others observe that this individual cannot be drawn into unproductive arguments because they consistently redirect interactions toward constructive outcomes. The internal fortress, destroying the weak self. While strategic comebacks provide tactical tools for managing external challenges, their effectiveness ultimately depends on internal transformation that eliminates vulnerability to psychological manipulation and emotional reactivity. The concept of destroying one's weak self represents perhaps the most crucial element in developing unassailable personal strength. The weak self manifests through various characteristics that create exploitable vulnerabilities. These include excessive need for approval, fear of criticism, attachment to being right, emotional reactivity to challenge, and defensive responses to perceived slights. Each of these characteristics provides entry points for others to manipulate, control, or destabilize one's emotional state and decision-making capacity. The process of destroying these weaknesses requires systematic examination of internal responses to external pressure. When criticism or challenge arises, the strong individual observes their immediate internal reaction without being controlled by it. This observation creates space between stimulus and response, allowing choice about how to engage rather than automatic reactivity. Consider the executive who discovers that criticism of their decisions triggers immediate anger and defensive justification. This emotional reactivity represents vulnerability because others can predictably provoke these responses to derail important conversations or undermine confidence. The process of destroying this weakness involves training oneself to observe the anger without expressing it, analyze the criticism objectively without personalizing it, and respond strategically rather than emotionally. The transformation requires developing what might be called emotional sovereignty, the ability to choose one's emotional state regardless of external circumstances. This sovereignty emerges through consistent practice of observing internal reactions, questioning automatic assumptions, and selecting responses based on strategic considerations rather than emotional impulses. The strong individual recognizes that others' opinions, criticisms, and challenges reflect their own perspectives, needs, and agendas rather than objective truth about one's worth or competence. This recognition eliminates the power of external validation or criticism to determine internal state, creating genuine independence from others' judgments while maintaining openness to useful feedback. The psychology of unassailable strength. True psychological strength emerges not from aggressive dominance or emotional numbness, but from clear understanding of one's own capabilities, values, and objectives combined with realistic assessment of external circumstances. The unassailable individual cannot be manipulated because they maintain clear boundaries between their internal experience and others' attempts to influence them. This strength manifests through several key characteristics. First, the ability to remain calm and centered regardless of external pressure or provocation. This calmness emerges not from suppressing emotion but from genuine confidence in one's ability to handle whatever situations arise. Second, clear differentiation between useful feedback and attempted manipulation, accepting the former while remaining immune to the latter. Third, consistent action based on long-term objectives rather than immediate emotional impulses or others' expectations. This consistency creates predictable reliability that others learn to respect while eliminating the anxiety that comes from reactive decision-making. Fourth, willingness to disappoint others when necessary to maintain integrity or achieve important goals, recognizing that universal approval represents neither realistic nor desirable objective. The development of unassailable strength requires honest self-assessment about current weaknesses and systematic work to address them. This might involve therapy, coaching, meditation, or other practices that increase self-awareness and emotional regulation. The key element involves commitment to growth rather than self-protection, recognizing that temporary discomfort of examining weaknesses leads to permanent strength that eliminates future vulnerability. The strategic individual also recognizes that strength development represents ongoing process rather than achieved state. Regular challenges provide opportunities to test and refine inner resilience while revealing areas requiring further development. Each successfully navigated conflict or challenge builds additional confidence and capability. Integration of external strategy and internal strength. The 7 strategic comebacks achieve maximum effectiveness when they emerge from genuine internal strength rather than clever techniques applied over underlying insecurity. The external strategies serve as expressions of inner confidence rather than masks hiding inner weakness. This integration creates authentic power that others recognize and respect even when they cannot articulate the specific reasons. When strategic responses emerge from internal strength, they carry conviction and authority that makes them nearly impossible to challenge effectively. Others sense the genuine confidence behind the words and recognize that continued argument will not achieve their desired emotional satisfaction or dominance. The combination of tactical skill and authentic strength creates commanding presence that naturally attracts respect and cooperation. The integration also involves developing intuitive sense of when to apply which strategic approaches based on reading the specific dynamics of each situation. Different personalities and contexts require different approaches, and internal strength provides the confidence to select and execute the most appropriate strategy without anxiety about potential failure. Moreover, the internally strong individual recognizes when strategic response may not be necessary or appropriate. Sometimes direct engagement, genuine curiosity about others' perspectives, or collaborative problem-solving serves objectives better than efficient argument termination. Strength includes flexibility to choose appropriate responses rather than rigid adherence to particular techniques. Practical applications in professional contexts. The integration of strategic comebacks with internal strength transformation creates powerful advantages in professional environments where conflicts, challenges, and power dynamics significantly impact career success and organizational effectiveness. These skills prove particularly valuable in leadership positions where others constantly test authority and decision-making capability. Consider the senior manager facing resistance to necessary organizational changes. Traditional approaches might involve lengthy explanations, defensive justifications, or authoritarian demands for compliance. The strategic approach combines clear communication of decisions with sophisticated management of resistance dynamics. When department heads challenge the change by saying, "This restructuring will destroy team morale and reduce productivity," the strategic response might utilize multiple comeback principles. I understand concerns about morale impact. Given the competitive pressures we're facing, the real question isn't whether change involves short-term disruption, but how we support our teams through transition while positioning for long-term success. Let's focus on identifying specific support resources and communication strategies that will help everyone adapt effectively. This response acknowledges concerns without accepting their validity, reframes the discussion around broader competitive reality, and redirects toward constructive problem solving. The internal strength component prevents defensive reactivity to the criticism while maintaining confidence in the decision-making process. The long-term impact in professional contexts involves building reputation for competence, reliability, and sophisticated thinking that opens opportunities for increased responsibility and influence. Others learn to approach this individual with more thoughtful communication because they recognize that casual criticism or challenge will not achieve desired results. Applications in personal relationships. Strategic communication principles require careful adaptation for personal relationships where emotional connection and long-term intimacy take priority over efficiency and dominance. The goal shifts from winning arguments to maintaining relationship quality while addressing legitimate concerns and conflicts that inevitably arise. In personal contexts, the strategic approaches focus more heavily on understanding and addressing underlying emotional needs rather than simply ending disagreements. The internal strength component becomes even more crucial because personal relationships trigger deeper vulnerabilities and emotional reactions than professional interactions. When a romantic partner expresses frustration by saying, "You never prioritize our relationship and always put work first," the strategic response adapts the principles while maintaining emotional sensitivity. "I hear that you're feeling disconnected from me, and that matters deeply to me." Rather than debating specific examples, let's talk about what would help you feel more valued and connected, and I'll share what support I need to balance work demands with our relationship priorities. This response acknowledges the emotional content behind the complaint, validates the partner's feelings without accepting the specific accusation, and redirects toward collaborative problem solving that serves the relationship rather than individual ego needs. The internal strength component in personal relationships involves maintaining individual identity and boundaries while remaining emotionally open and responsive to legitimate partner needs. This balance requires ongoing negotiation between autonomy and connection, ensuring that strategic communication serves relationship health rather than personal dominance. Long-term development and mastery. The journey toward mastering strategic communication and developing unassailable internal strength represents a lifelong process rather than achieved destination. Each interaction provides opportunities for learning, refinement, and growth in both tactical skill and inner development. Advanced practitioners recognize that true mastery involves transcending the need to use strategic techniques frequently because their presence and communication style naturally discourage argumentative interactions. Others sense the strength and competence and adjust their approach accordingly, leading to more collaborative and respectful interactions without conscious strategic effort. This advanced level emerges through years of consistent practice, honest self-reflection, and commitment to growth beyond immediate tactical advantages. The individual develops intuitive understanding of human psychology and group dynamics that allows natural, authentic responses that achieve strategic objectives without appearing calculated or manipulative. The ultimate expression of this mastery involves using these capabilities primarily to create positive outcomes for others rather than simply protecting oneself from challenge or criticism. The internally strong individual can afford to be generous with their strength, using strategic skills to help others succeed and grow rather than maintaining defensive positions. The broader impact on leadership and influence. As individuals develop mastery of strategic communication combined with genuine internal strength, they naturally attract leadership opportunities and increased influence within their personal and professional communities. Others recognize authentic competence and strength, creating natural gravitation toward their leadership and guidance. This influence emerges not from manipulation or dominance but from demonstrated ability to navigate complex situations effectively while maintaining integrity and supporting others' success. People naturally seek guidance from those who demonstrate consistent strength, wisdom, and strategic thinking capability. The broader impact extends beyond individual success to improved outcomes for teams, organizations, and communities. When leaders possess both strategic communication skills and internal strength, they create environments where excellence flourishes, conflicts resolve efficiently, and group energy focuses on productive objectives rather than interpersonal drama. The ripple effects of this development continue expanding as others observe and learn from these examples of effective leadership and personal strength. The strategic individual becomes model for others seeking to develop similar capabilities, multiplying the positive impact beyond their direct sphere of influence. Conclusion: the synthesis of strategy and strength. The integration of Machiavellian strategic principles with deep personal development represents powerful synthesis that creates genuine authority and influence while maintaining ethical integrity and authentic relationships. The 7 strategic comebacks provide tactical tools for managing external challenges efficiently, while the internal development work creates foundation of strength that makes external manipulation impossible. This approach recognizes that true power emerges from competence rather than aggression, from confidence rather than arrogance, and from strategic thinking rather than reactive emotion. The individual who masters these elements becomes genuinely formidable not because they dominate others, but because they cannot be dominated by others while remaining capable of creating positive outcomes in challenging situations. The journey requires dedication to both external skill development and internal growth, recognizing that sustainable strength demands ongoing attention to both dimensions. The rewards extend far beyond winning arguments or avoiding criticism to include genuine respect from others, increased opportunities for leadership and influence, and deep personal satisfaction that comes from authentic competence and inner strength. Most importantly, this development serves purposes beyond individual advantage to contribute toward more productive, respectful, and effective human interactions in all contexts. When more people develop these capabilities, the overall quality of communication and collaboration improves, creating positive cycles that benefit entire communities and organizations. The man who destroys his weak self truly cannot be destroyed by others, not because he becomes invulnerable to all harm, but because he eliminates the internal weaknesses that others might exploit while developing capabilities to navigate challenges effectively. This represents perhaps the highest form of practical wisdom, the ability to remain strong and centered while helping others succeed and grow.